solo panel today. So, without further ado, we have former Disney animator, current professor at USC. Please welcome to the stage, Tom Sito.
This is the theater Citizen Kane debuted in. And actually, when I first came to Los Angeles in 1978, I saw Star Wars here for the first time. I was one of those kind of like slugs that like, when there's a big movie, everybody's crazy to see it. I'm like, Adam. And I waited and everything, but then I was out here, and it was the Hollywood Theater then. And what happened was contractually, was that man was Chinese, but then contractually they had to leave because there was a new movie coming in. So they put Star Wars across the street here. And the huge crowds that were waiting for Star Wars just went, and they were all here, like that. But it was like the first time, I was like, oh my goodness, what a gorgeous old theater. And ever since then, we've had like the Lion King premiere, and Aladdin's premiere, and Beauty and the Beast premiere, and just so many wonderful films. And you're going to meet some of my colleagues, because we all had a lot of us had our like, one of our first big breaks on this wonderful film. So I'm going to start with, first off, one of the legendary animators in Hollywood, a man who gave you Scar, Gaston, which were King Triton, Lilo from Lilo and Stitch, Mr. Andreas Deja. Next will be a person who started as my assistant on Roger Rabbit, and then became a great animator in her own right, working for Disney and DreamWorks and films like How to Train Your Dragon, and what was the other, Little Shrek, a whole bunch of those films. Miss Irene Parkins. And finally, another one of the great Disney animators, a fellow that not only helped give life to Roger, but also worked on projects like Hades in Hercules, and Treasure Planet, and Meet the Robinsons, and all kinds of fantastic stuff. Nick Ranieri. So, let's start out by, how did you first hear, let's just go around a little bit, just say, how did you first hear of the project, and how did you wind up on the film? We were all on the London crew. There was originally, when the movie began, originally, of course, you know, Steven Spielberg was involved, and Disney was involved, and Chuck Jones was involved a little bit at the beginning of the design stages. And there was some discussion about whether they would do the animation at ILM, whether they do the animation on the Paramount lot or at Disney, and the compromise was England, and everything to use the Richard Williams studios. So a lot of us went to London to work on the project. So I'd like to know, like, how did you guys first find out about it? So let's start with
I had actually, just before Roger Rabbit came to be, met Richard Williams socially, you know, like at the Academy events and things like that. And he was on the phone with me one time. He said, you know, I've never worked for Disney, but I might work for them after all. I said, how? And he says, well, they're just putting this thing together, and Spielberg is going to be involved, and Robert Zemeckis is going to be involved, I'm going to be involved, and this is called Roger Rabbit, and it's going to combine live action animation, and it really sounded great. So that's how I heard it for the first time. And then he asked me a few months later whether I want to work on it. And I said, what's going to be done in London? And I'm here now, in Burbank. And he said, well, let's take you over for a year. And I just moved from Germany to Burbank a few years prior, and I said, I don't know if I want to go back to Europe at this point, so I wasn't really interested And then the animation producer of the film, Don Hahn, said, why don't you have dinner with me and Richard at a Mexican place in Burbank, and we'll talk about it. So we did talk about it, and the margaritas kept flowing, and I signed on. True story.
So I was living in Canada at the time, Canadian, and a friend of mine that was in London told me that Disney was hiring. And so I said, well, do you think I can get a job there? And they said, yeah, come on over. And my boyfriend at the time didn't want to go because he wanted to watch the Blue Jays win the World Series, which they did. And so I ended up going on my own and with a girlfriend. And I walked in and did a cleanup test, and it had to be the ostrich in
That's what I animated.
Oh, yeah.
You cleaned that up?
I just had to do one in between.
Oh.
I just had to clean up one in between. They go, you have the job. And I'm like, oh. So I got the job just that day. I walked in and got the job.
I was working at a animation commercial house in Toronto, Canada, and I got fired. So I figured, why don't I try just going over to England and see what I could find there, because I heard about this project, Roger Rabbit, and I thought, oh wow, my goal was to be able to get over there and animate the Warner Brothers characters, because I heard they were going to be a part of it, because I was a huge Warner Brothers fan. And coincidentally, of course, I didn't actually end up animating any of those characters, but everything but those. But anyways, yeah, I went over there and I went around the different studios looking for work, and I finally got in and met Don Hahn to get a job there. And they said, you know what, we looked at your stuff and we could give you an assistant job, but we don't get people visas who are not animators, so we can't use you. And I said, well, did I mention I had an Italian passport, which meant I was EC? And Don just looked at me and goes, welcome aboard. Because I didn't realize it. I mean, they were hurting. They needed people. There's so much controversy on this film. There were, Richard Williams was directing, and there were people who in London wouldn't work for Richard Williams, and then there were people in London who Richard Williams didn't want working for him. And I remember this is halfway through the production, I was hearing somebody on the phone, one of the secretaries saying, we put an ad in the paper and people just don't get it. They're sending us their needlepoint and things like that. And we need animators, So that's how they got in.
Yeah, I had it's funny because I've been working in Los Angeles on a lot of television shows at the time. I worked for Richard Williams before. I worked for Dick Williams in New York and in England, and as well as Los Angeles. But at the time I was working on TV shows like He-Man and Masters of the Universe. Some fans out there. There you go. And but I was in England, hanging out with my friend Eric Goldberg, who had his own studio. He did pretty good, right? I heard he did well. And I went up to have lunch with my friend Chuck Cabbage, who I'd worked with in the past, who was on Roger. And he said, why don't you go say hi to Dick? And I said, I haven't seen Dick in a while. And I know Dick's mad at a few people that I'm friends with. He goes, only heard for a minute. Oh, okay. So I walked in at Dick's office, went, hi, Dick. And he goes, oh, Sito, you must work on this movie. You have to. And I said, well, my wife's the checker. He goes, oh, she's hired too. Okay. And he just took me by the hand and walked me into Don's office and said, Don, this is Tom Sito. He's crazy. Tells stories. Hire him. And Don goes, got it. And that's how I got in.
It was a simpler world back then.
It was funny. I remember Chuck. I went up to Chuck Damage, and I said, "I've never heard of this Tom Sito guy. Who is he, right?" And Chuck says, "Well, he worked with me on this film at Nelvana called Rock and Rule." And I said, "Really? I've seen that before." And he goes, "Well, there's this one scene of this character, this female character who's doing an interview, and she was sort of a valley girl." And I remember that scene. And Chuck says, "Yeah, Tom animated that." I said, "Oh yeah, he's got to work here." Yeah.
It was fun, wasn't it? So, and it's interesting because I do remember when I was working on the He-Man stuff and all, talking to a friend who was in the Disney training program. I think it was Dan Haskett, and Dan said, "Oh yeah, the studio just optioned this book. Darryl Van Sitters is doing something with it, and it's a film noir about a detective investigating the murder of a cartoon character." And I said, "That's a great idea, wow." And he goes, "Yeah, but we won't do it." It just seemed like, one of these projects that just seemed so out there from like the traditional type of animated films at the time, that it seemed kind of amazing that we were going to do it, actually. And then I remember taking home the script and reading it the first day. And we so used, all through the 1980s, everything was PC and everything was polite, and you couldn't hit anybody, you couldn't do any cartoon violence, the old-fashioned style. And then I'm reading this script where all this like hitting with frying pans and all these things and all stuff. And the next day I went to Bob Zemeckis and said, "This is good. Are we really going to do this?" And he goes, "Of course we are." Great. I mean, it just seems such an unusual project. And everything from Steve.
It even used to have some language in it, which was capital. I remember I animated a few scenes with the weasel leader, Smartass, and I remember he was cornering Bob Hoskins by the sink. He was hiding Roger in the sink, and he was holding this live-action gun, and he threatened Bob Hoskins by saying, "Cut the bullshit." So I get a Disney actually says shit on it. So I animated it, and then Roy Disney came over. You know where this is going. And he saw the whole sequence, and he said, "Well, it's me who has my name on this film still, and we're not going to say bullshit." So they changed it to bullshtick. But my lip sync also worked for bullshtick, so I didn't have to change anything.
I remember there's one, I think Zemeckis kept in one where Bob Hoskins goes, like right after Roger does the factory whistle and the bottle blows up, Hoskins goes, "Crazy son of a bitch," something. And I think Zemeckis wanted that because he wanted the PG-13. He was worried that if it was a PG, he would lose like teen-age audiences, that wouldn't go see a kiddie film.
About the audience right now, we're doing all this.
Well, actually, I think what it was is some of them, like, I think I did the only scene where Roger said hell. And so they chopped that. But he was a good guy. So I guess they decided, maybe the weasels or in certain situations they could have them curse, but not the good guys or something, so.
So what was it like in terms of like, what did you find most challenging working on a film? Like a film with such tight live action sort of relationship?
Well, after I had said yes and went to London, I got cold feet. I thought, you said, you don't even know how to do this. You've never done this. This is going to be a high-profile film. And so I remember arriving at Heathrow, being brought to the studio straight away from the airport, and they got me this big box of photostats. These are basically photographs of each frame from that scene. Huge box, hundreds of them. And they say, "Welcome to London, here's your first scene." There's no time for jet lag or anything. And it was actually the ostrich scene from early on in the film, going up into Maroon Studios entryway there. Yeah, and so I don't know. I just sort of winged it. And so you look at the photostats. What helped a little bit for most of the film, you couldn't see the ostrich's feet, so the contact to the live action wasn't as critical. And I just kind of winged it, and it seemed to work out.
Yeah, you're talking about contact and stuff like that. I mean, sometimes it's pretty easy, right? Stairs and things like that, right? But other times, at the end, in the factory, you got like cement floor as far as the eye could see. And I remember, you know, you're trying to match these characters and you're looking for some sort of pebble or some sort of divot in the ground that you could lock a toe onto so you could keep it from sliding, you know. That's insane.
Well, because for me, I wasn't an animator, I was an assistant animator. The hardest part was because every animator animated different characters different, and our job was to make it all look the same, like as if one person animated it. So it was just hard taking everybody's work and trying to make it all tomorrow, so that was my part.
It was just hard to make it look perfect, you know, because when the animated character was holding a live action gun, like the Smartass character, it couldn't slide up and down the shaft of the gun. It had to be completely perfect, every single frame. You know? So that part wasn't easy. But I goofed once, and it's still in the movie, and you will see it. I will reveal to you where I screwed up big time. So I was given this long scene, like in the middle, after the first third of the film, which is a big argument between Bob Hoskins and the rabbit. And there's this bed in the middle of the frame. On the right side is the rabbit, Hoskins is on the left, and they argue. And eventually Roger hops onto the bed and they keep arguing. The camera keeps going very slightly. So it was a challenging scene, but there were all these things happening that were thought of beforehand. For example, at one point, Roger was supposed to lean on the edge of the bed, and at that point, they actually had some suction things going on, you know, where it actually showed the indentations of that time when his hands were supposed to be leaning on the bed. Well, I've forgotten about that. So when you watch the scene now, it's still in that, for no reason, it's two bed edges go. There's no Roger hand or nothing. It isn't the film.
So sometimes you try to cover it up. Remember your scene where Roger turns around on a pillow and the pillow goes so they put a dark
They put a big shadow.
Yeah.
Thank you, ILM, saved my
Yeah, I know one of the things Robert Zemeckis said at the beginning too was he said, we're not making a serial commercial here where you have the human beings are talking and the characters over here, and you don't believe they're in the same world. He said, I want the characters to touch each other and interact, you know. So, you know, Jessica's like grabbing Hoskins' cheeks and mussing his hair, and he says, I want them to physically touch one another, you know. So it has that tactile kind of sense to it. I love the scene where Roger like sits at Eddie Downey's brother's desk, and when he says get off of there, he moves his hand and leaves fingerprints. It was so nice. It was such a nice scene.
The other challenging thing was that throughout the film, we dealt with every single scene 24 drawings per second. But in normal animation, you can get away with 12 for many scenes, you know, we cut down. But on this one, it was 24 drawings per second, period.
I remember Don going around and there was like a memo or something at the very end. It's like, okay guys, start animating on twos. We gotta get this thing done.
Save time.
And then we looked over at Dick, and when we came out, Dick goes, do it on ones.
I think like also, you know, again, like computer-wise, there was nothing. I mean, you know, Pixar at this time was like a little software company in the Bay Area trying to convince Steve Jobs, like, let's do a short once in a while. Like that's where it was, CG-wise. Really, like I think they just automated the optical printer, but we did like one of the last big, what we would call Matt Roto type films, where it was hand-painted shadows, hand-painted characters. It was all done by hand, really. And one of the hardest things for a lot of us was registration. It was always like, you know, how things were moving because they did an original test with what they call a lockdown camera, kind of like a Ray Harryhausen movie. Where, like, you know, in Harryhausen movies, when there's the animated shot, usually the camera's not moving, it's stationary. And they shot that, and Dick said it looked very kind of lifeless, you know. And so Dick used to say the best way to do things is the hard way. And he just told somebody, just shoot your movie, just shoot a Amblin Zemeckis action.
You somehow plug in the characters.
Yeah,
somehow.
we'll do it somehow.
They'll deal with it, so, you know.
Spielberg came to the studio, and he came around and met everybody. But I wanted to get a photo with just Spielberg, and he had to be in it for sure. But when the person was taking the photo, he said, "Take two in case the first one doesn't turn out." And that was the day before we had the cameras where we go, "Oh, I don't like that. We're taking another photo. Oh, I don't like that take." Because in case the photo didn't turn out, so I had two photos. And Spielberg.
We had some famous guests coming by. Do you remember Jim Henson came by? And Roger Davies. And he saw some scenes with Cal. And what was the Cal. Jim Henson. Yeah. And he kind of, his eyes went like this. He says, "Oh, it is going to be good." And then I had the joy to give George Lucas a tour.
George Lucas came
by.
I remember it was the day after, like, we had a Friday night, like, sort of wine party. And in England, the custodians, if they don't clean up on Friday, they don't come back till Monday. So George came on, like, a Saturday or something like that. Sunday? Oh, yeah. So everybody was staggering in with, like, hangovers, and the lift was busted, the elevator. So he had to walk, like, 5 flights up. And the floor was sticky from wine. And it's like, here's the studio. It was good fun.
And they would have, was like Spielberg's, toy almost. He'd have like people coming by, celebrities and stuff like that. I mean, I remember Christian Bale. They shoot Empire of the Sun, right? It was on the weekend. And, it's kid, right? I didn't know who he was.
But this was really part of the production, the whole social thing in pubs, it's different than in here. Because usually we would maybe finish at 7 o'clock, then go downstairs to a pub, and I mean most people would do that. Then have a pint, and then come back and work some more. That's how it went.
I remember, like, working with these classic characters, like, what was the challenge you think about, it's one thing, like, Roger was a character that we were making up, so Roger was a new character. But when you had to work with classic characters like Mickey or Bugs or, Wile E. Coyote or something, well, Wile E. Coyote, Yosemite Sam was, yeah. So is there a particular challenge when you have to take on a classic character?
We just had to study them, study the old shorts and see how they were animated and try to do that.
Well, the studios are pretty good. They'd send model sheets.
We had model sheets,
Yeah.
we had to take some video, the old shorts on videos.
And those model sheets that we didn't have, we had the animation nerds working there. So everybody, I mean, I collected model sheets. I had a stack of them,
I worked on the Betty Boop part. Remember when Roger Chazon did that to Betty Boop?
Oh, yeah, Benny Flash.
Yeah.
Frame number,
But it's an homage to Betty. That's what they did. That's what they did. Yeah. I remember I did a scene at the end when Sylvester the cat, and it was Mel Blanc did the dialogue. And Mel Blanc died like 8 months after the movie came out. So it's like we had some of the last Elmer. Some of the last Mel Blanc dialogue. And it's when the characters are saying, "Tell you one thing, Doc, there wasn't no rabbit, or a dog, or a sheep." And Sylvester goes, "Or a pussy." And he does this lisp, like that. So I said, what I always loved about those older cartoons is they put a lot of spit in the things. The spit's funny, so it was a cookie. That's right. Had some spit, but then the Walter Lantz people complained because Woody Woodpecker was right underneath him. And Tom said, "You can't spit on Woody Woodpecker." I said, "I'm not. He's just talking out extemporaneously, And we were getting messages from the Lantz Foundation. Don't spit on Woody Woodpecker.
there actually was some studio discussion, should I say, that, for example, Mickey Mouse in the film should have the same screen time as Bugs Bunny. So what was that the case?
Warner Brothers wouldn't allow Bugs Bunny unless he had
to be upstage when Mickey Mouse. So there was all that going on. But I think it really was Steven Spielberg who made all that happen. Because it was really him who made the phone calls to each studio and asked, how can you turn down Steven Spielberg?
Wasn't Spielberg, didn't he say, unless you comply with my demands, I won't do Tiny Toons or something like that?
But it's like, you know, I remember like, you know, I did like the last shot in the movie of all those like, hundreds of characters all dancing and singing and everything. I mean, you did Porky Pig afterwards to sing That's All Folks. And I remember, I was remember scene 235-57. I always remember that. It was like burned in my memory. But it had all those characters and all. And I guess what happened is that the Disney Corporation said, you know, we're the chief, you know, producers of this film, and we can't end with Porky Pig. We can't end the movie with a Warner character. So they went to the morgue and they got Tinkerbell from the TV show. And Tinkerbell comes out and taps him on the nose. That's the end of it. Yeah.
It's studio politics.
And it was animated by, you know, Clear Weeks or you know, what it was like, you know, it's from the original TV show.
Did you guys sing the song?
Yeah, we all did, right?
But I wasn't sure.
When you hear this song, Smile, down your smile, that's us.
That's us. Yeah, we're all singing. Yeah. On the song sheet, you know, we all got the song sheet and stuff. So.
Yeah, and they gave us all a pound, you know.
Oh yeah, it was like 1 pound.
Sign, you get $1 or whatever.
Why do you think the film has such lasting power with audiences? I mean, so many movies have come and gone since, and so many phenomena and all. Why do you think Roger Rabbit stays with people?
Sure. Because there's only one like that. You know, there really isn't. I mean, there's Space Jam, you know, which is also well done. There's something of a film noir,
Yeah.
and really doing it with a big budget and going all the way artistically and technically. It really hasn't been done since, I think.
It's first of its kind. After that, there was so many copycats. Every single commercial had that style, the highlights and the shadows and all that stuff. I mean, what? Cool world, yeah.
They tried.
They tried.
Yeah.
But again, you know, that style made a lasting impact in the industry, and a film like that, no one ever seen that. They haven't seen that type of stuff since the 40s.
There were actually some film critics who said, we thought this kind of animation couldn't be done anymore. We thought this was dead, you know?
Yeah. I remember that they cut 3 trailers because originally Disney was trying to revive the Walt Disney Presents brand, which people don't remember at this time, but you know they had a lot of like disappointing films, like you know Condor Man and you know Herbie Goes Bananas and Tamarind Seed, and, you know a lot of films they'd rather not remember. Yeah, the Black Hole, those things. And so Zemeckis actually fought that because he said, I don't want it to be a Disney release because it's going to hurt the audience, you know, because the audience is going to not want it. And then they wanted to do it as an Amblin film, and then the compromise was to make it a Touchstone. So it's an Amblin Touchstone release. You know, but I remember we would see trailers like from the makers from Steven Spielberg, the makers of blah blah blah, and then from the makers of Walt Disney. You know, and you just see trailer after trailer until the final one, you know, actually happens. So, what's your favorite? We got to wrap up. But like, what's your favorite memory? Do you think coming off the film?
This sense of pride, even after all those years, you know,
Meeting everybody.
experience. I mean, it was super hard work. You couldn't do anything but eat, sleep, and animate. But it was so worth it. It was so worth it.
You're gonna ask anybody here that's working on it?
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's right. And actually, I want to do that too before we leave. Anybody out there who worked on the film, please stand up. The head ILM guy, and he worked on a bunch of Star Wars films. And we were at the wrap party, he goes, "It's the hardest thing I've ever done." He says, "The space operas, we got that down. You know, spaceship, zap, boom, you know." This was hard.
You know, Andreas and I, we predicted this time now. I remember when the film finished, we were going, you know, we're going to meet sometime, you know, like 30, 40 years from now. We did it by hand.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Andreas.